Hello and welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about breaking the software developer stereotype with Richard Donovan. We'll be talking about what it is, also why it's unhelpful, and not just to developers entering the industry, but also those already in it, as well as people that work with them as well. But yeah, for those of you joining for the first time, or those of you coming back, welcome to the Junior Developer Link podcast. My name's Chris. I am joined here by Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
Good to have you on. And we started this podcast recently because as part of the Junior Developer Link, which we launched alongside our company, we basically wanted to get our talks to more people. We've been doing events for a couple of years, and we've basically found that people are really happy to help out the next wave of junior developers. And that's kind of how I've got connected with Richard here. I think I found you on LinkedIn, Richard, through some of your content. Obviously, welcome again, and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do.
Thanks for having me on. First of all, I'm Rich, and basically, I've been in software development for about 22 years now, and I am self-taught, so I have no degree. I started at the very bottom of a small software house, and they made sure they told me that I was at the bottom as well. Um, I was a point and
How do
click
you mean?
tester. Literally, they were like, "There's no one beneath you in this company,"
Was that your first
and it
day?
sounds
Is that how
yeah,
it
it
is that
sounds
how it started?
terrible. It sounds terrible, but it was followed up by, although you're at the bottom, you can go anywhere within this company as long if you put your mind to it, if you put the work in, you can go anywhere. And I pointed and clicked and found a few errors and took it to the devs, and they turned it around pretty quickly, tried it again, all fixed, and I was left with the question, how did you do that? So I'd moved house, left home a couple of 100 miles away, and I was in a small town, only knew my brother, and long story short, I took a load of the technical books home from the shelf and read them in my spare time because I had nothing better to do and no friends. So that was the beginning. That was the start. And I was fortunate enough to catch on to the kind of .NET wave as it started, literally 1.0, and I'd started reading those books on my own in my own time for about 3 or 4 months prior to the company then announcing they were going to rewrite their entire software in .NET. So suddenly I've kind of gone from this 17-year-old kid who knows very little to actually someone who knows a little bit more than some of the other people I was working with, and they're all loaded with degrees and God knows what. So that was quite interesting.
And you just
And
had
then
no friends and a load of books.
exactly that. And but I mean, we'll get on to a bit more of the stereotype in a minute. But I was definitely there's definitely elements of that in there. 22 years later, I've been a junior, I've been a senior, I've been a tech lead, I've been a software architect, and sitting in my job as a software architect, I'm sitting at my computer, I suppose approaching 40, so we might be talking about a bit of a midlife crisis, and I just started to think, if I was on my deathbed and I'm looking back at the time that I've spent on this earth, and let's just say that that time is all we ever have, I just asked myself, would I be happy with how I spent it? And I just think, having spent probably 85, 95% of it, not really communicating an awful lot, not really impacting people, I wouldn't be that happy with that. So I literally, in that moment, kind of decided, do you know what, I want to work with people more. And to make this slightly longer story a little shorter, let's say I found mindset coaching, I trained to become a mindset coach, I trained to become a personal trainer as well, and I've decided that I'm going to bring all that stuff together to help software developers with their mindset and basically well-being as a whole.
Love that. I guess before we go on to the kind of software developer stereotype, like what is a mindset coach? Because I think I've seen it outside of kind of the workplace, like quite a bit, but I've not seen, well, probably the first one that I've seen in the tech industry, if I'm honest. So what actually is a mindset coach?
So mindset coaching is really about it's a lot about self-awareness. It's about linking your own thinking to the outcomes that you're achieving. And that's really broad, but literally they can be any outcomes. And for each and every situation you find yourself in, what what we find is how we think about those situations plays a huge role in one, how we feel about them, two, how we then behave on the back of them, and three, ultimately the outcome we get in any given situation.
Sure. Well, I'm sure that's something that you could talk about for an hours and hours and hours. But you chose to talk about the software developer stereotype. I guess why did you choose that topic?
I guess it kind of stems back. So part of the reason of kind of bringing mindset coaching to software developers is about me reflecting on my career and often how I've felt in various situations and how I felt that there wasn't really that much support out there, whether it's mindset or whether it's well-being in general. And some of that kind of boils down to the software developer stereotype. And so as an example, I used to have a lot more of the traits than I maybe do now. Um, but I also had one or two that were outside of it. And they were both interesting. So when I was in my first role, I felt a bit of an outcast because all the devs were talking about Star Wars or Star Trek, and they're like, "Oh yeah," da, da, da. And I'm like, "I one haven't seen it, two not interested in seeing it." So immediately I'm like, "Who's that guy?" Um, that being said, I've already said I spent a lot of time on my own without friends and just reading books, so there's definitely some of it in there. And then on the other side of that as well, all the devs are then playing Counter Strike or Half Life or whatever it is at lunchtime, and I'm kind of leaving the office with my gym bag to go to the gym. And straight away, it's like software developers don't do that. Like, what are you doing? So I guess they're the real origins, but extrapolating that out through my career, we then and thinking about a number of people I've worked with, a number of people I've seen, and again also how I felt, and just looking at the impacts of that on the role itself, on how other people treat you as a software developer, and then again, looking forward, I'm starting to think new people coming into the industry, do they want to follow that stereotype? In my view, I don't think it's optimal for the way software development is these days, in which it's such a collaborative process and communication is so vital. And actually, it sounds a bit daft, but being friendly and easy to work with go a hell of a long way.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I guess like first of all, it kind of boils down to this stereotype. Like what is the software developer stereotype in a sort of nutshell, the one that we're trying to get away from?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a few slightly different versions between whether you're outside looking in or whether you're the actual developer. But maybe the slightly more damning stereotype, shall we say, is along the lines of introverted, maybe slightly socially awkward, wants to sit in a dark room with the headphones on, not speaking to anyone, tapping away on the keyboard, do not disturb, a bit grumpy, eats loads of snacky food, addicted to caffeine. It's, I think everyone has their own little view, but I think a lot of that will come into it.
Um, just as you were going through that, I have had days where I feel like I'm that person. I'm not gonna lie, but I guess overall as well. Do you reckon it's almost a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that people are coming into this environment treated as, and then kind of become that as much as anything else?
I think it can be that there's a number of factors. That's definitely one of them, and there's an argument to say that some people come into the industry maybe because they see that stereotype and they identify with it even before they become a developer, and they're like, well, that's who I am. I should be a developer. Whereas, I guess the opposite will also happen. So you then got people who are nothing like that. And we
Yeah.
risk them looking in and thinking, well, development's not for me. I'm not like those guys. I'm super extrovert. I communicate and I go to the gym and I'm healthy. Oh, I'm obviously not a developer. And I think that's quite damning, really.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's something as someone who is obviously asked to go and recruit for developers, like I'll often be told specifically, oh, this isn't a role for someone who, similar to what you said, wants to be head down, like headphones on, not speak to
Yeah.
anyone. That we really want someone who is going to be able to communicate with clients or like all of this kind of stuff. But they say it as if it's a very small percentage of developers and as if that's going to make it harder to find.
Mm.
So there definitely is that stereotype running through different kind of I guess levels of organizations as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, it would be interesting to be able to have statistics about who fits this quarter and who fits that, and but I honestly do think that things are changing, and I think more developers are breaking that stereotype. They are going to the gym. They are um, exploring other interests outside of code. Like that, for me, that's another really big thing. So we get it rammed down our throats all the time. You need to be tech, tech, tech. You need to be coding constantly. You need to be staying up late and doing personal projects and all of that stuff. And I've kind of, particularly in the last 5 years, I've really kind of battled against that and been a bit more like, I enjoy coding, yes, but I'm not going to do that 24 hours a day. I like to run. I like to play squash. I like to go to the gym. I like to stay fit and all of that stuff. And I'm not defined by being a developer. It's it's just an I mean, it's just an awesome part of me, to be honest. Like, it's
Yeah.
great to be that. It's great to have those.
Yeah, because again, from like a requirements perspective, like I think it happens less and less, but like we do sometimes get asked, like we just want someone that loves coding, like as if they're gonna, like you said, break for lunch and they'll be eating a sandwich whilst coding a personal project, and then they'll finish and they'll go to a hackathon, and then they'll go to sleep
Yeah,
for 4 hours, and then they'll up and like work on another side project like before work. Like I don't recruit when I get home. Like, like why would it be any different in another industry? Like I love my job, but I don't get home and then just be like, "Oh, I wonder if any of my friends are looking for work. Like, what can I do outside of this? Like, it's a job, right? And ultimately, people can be extremely good at their job, and it not also be their free time, like their hobby and their pastime as well at the same time.
absolutely. And again, you know, we're kind of seeing it already from like different angles, and you know you're bringing the kind of company side to that conversation, which you know I kind of know, but I hear a little bit less about that. Um, but it just ties in with everything. But that's a really interesting point, and it's another part of the stereotype of someone who just like codes, codes, codes. They just love it. They just love it. And um, I I remember at one point in my career when I was doing more of that stuff, and I wasn't doing the other things outside of code. And I remember actually at one time feeling quite lonely, and and it sounds like an odd thing to say because I had a partner, had a family, and what would happen is I'd go home and I'd try and have a conversation about maybe something I'm struggling with at work, or you know something I'm trying to get to the bottom of. I'd within a few seconds I'd see my partner's eyes glaze over, like she's got no idea what I'm talking about. I'm one of those people where I've not really got an awful lot of interest in talking to someone who's, let's say, not interested in what I'm
Yeah,
saying, whether it's because they don't understand or not. Like, you know, she wasn't being funny, but it's like I very quickly it's a pointless conversation.
yeah,
So then I stop, and then I find actually when I'm speaking to my brother, same thing, and then my other brother, same thing, and so suddenly I don't really have this outlet. I'm not massively sociable outside of work anyway, and that kind of built up a little bit. And I was like, and and then you think, well, okay, what else can I talk about? And it was, you know, again pretty damning to look inside and think, wow, I'm really one dimensional. I've got nothing else to talk about. So, you know, it's as much on me as it is them. Like I then decided, well, do you know what? Like I need to at least be a little bit more interesting, have some more like diverse thoughts and interests. So at least when I am speaking to the people that I care about and they maybe don't understand what I want to say, I can at least move the conversation on and still have that interaction and that conversation. And that goes, you know, not just for family, but that's the same for other people that you work with in other departments. You know, they're very similar. Sometimes they don't understand the code that you're talking about, but you can still have a conversation and you can still build a relationship.
I think it must be the same with I guess like other developers that you work with as well, right? Like, if you don't take the time to actually get to know what they like outside of that, like you'll end up just talking to them about coding, right?
Yeah, and it's just it's I guess as you kind of put it before, it becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you just kind of go around in circles, and so you know you talk about code, they talk about code, you talk about code, they talk about code, and it's everything's just so one-dimensional. And as much as that, I mean, that's not to say that you don't talk about code with your friends or your colleagues, even outside of work, because as I said there, like sometimes I want to do that. And I want to do that with someone who understands and maybe can give me some advice or whatever. I just don't want that to be the only thing that I can talk about, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it's probably with the like remote work's great. Like for so many people, it's given people flexibility, time with their families, just their life back to do actually other things. Like we're talking about going to the gym, like all of those kind of bits that are great about remote work. However, similar to what we were talking about, if someone thinks that all you're interested in is putting your headphones in and sitting there and coding, like they'll probably potentially leave you to it for a whole day, if not a whole week, and then check up with you when they need to. And then I guess it could be the reverse. If no one checks in on you, you assume that no one wants to speak to you about stuff, and you can just sit and crack on with your work. Whereas, like, it might actually be that you can get someone else's opinion on something quite quickly if you have more of more of a relationship with people to be able to discuss stuff. So like as much as remote work is great and has so many benefits, I guess it must be making things harder. And in a sense, even though people are at home like with their families, like you said, it can be, I guess, lonelier for people as well because they probably get quite isolated from their teams.
Yeah, I certainly felt it when the pandemic first hit. I was still working as a software architect, and I think for the first 2, maybe 3 months, it was a real kind of like, this is nice. We're in the office, and you get bombarded, you get interrupted all the time. People just walking past and just coming over, and there's not a lot you can do about it. But as you said, when we went remote, it was literally like a drop off. And for the first few months, it was like, wow, I get so much done here. Like no one's bothering me. No one's just randomly asking me questions, this, that, and the other. And initially, it was like, oh, this is great. But in all honesty, after the 3 months, I started to get a bit like, I'm not sure this is quite as quite as good as I first thought, and you do start to get a little bit. I don't know if lonely is the word in that regard, but I guess it's probably the best way of putting it. Um, and interestingly, to combat it, one of the guys that I was working with, we're quite good friends, and he also goes to the gym and has other interests, and we'd regularly just start a call, and in some cases we'd be on a call for like several hours of that day, and sometimes we'd be working together doing pair programming. Other times we'd be coding our separate stuff, but we'd just kind of be in there, and we could just talk and ask questions and that
Oh,
kind of
nice.
thing. So that kind of helped a little bit, but I certainly found that it was a big shift, and I found that interesting because I was kind of one of the people who was like, oh yeah, this is great to start with.
Yeah, for sure. I think I came from a company that we had to be in the office like every single day. There was no remote flexibility, like none of that. And it was always like you think about all the times that you would want to work from home and you're like, oh, if only I could, if only I could. Like I now obviously run my own company and we have a work from anywhere policy and I'm in the office 4 days a week because like I like choose to be. And I'm actually finding that more and more developers that we're speaking to are quite similar, but they don't want like set times that they have to be in the office, but they want an office kind of like nearby that they could go into if they wanted to, but like not on like set days and like all of that kind of stuff. So I think like people want the option to go back in now, which I'm seeing a huge increase.
Yeah, and as you say, it it goes it flips, doesn't it? It definitely goes both ways. I think anyone who's got a long commute will really appreciate the kind of work from home.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also about just having that autonomy and having those options and being able to decide rather than have someone be like, look, you are coming to the office, like you have to do this. You know, I think in some regards, some people will want to work from home almost in a slightly rebellious way to think, you used to force me to come to the office. Like, I've spent all this money commuting, parking, all of this other stuff. And now it's a little bit like, well, I want to be at home now. But as you say, I think given the option, personally, I would now I'd at least go into the office once a week, probably twice. Um, but that also depends on the people you work with, obviously.
Yeah. Depends on the company as well. I think some somehow are still struggling to figure out the whole hybrid working situation. Like I speak to people that are like, I have to come in every Tuesday, but like no one else is in. So like I'm sat in the office on my own on Teams to my manager who is at home. Like what's the point? Like they just pick a random day. Why not pick like a week a month that like everyone's in and just have everyone in on those days or at least like a day a week where the majority of people go in and like you get that crossover. Because what's the point in, like you said, if you got hour and a half commute into your office in central London, you got to pay 30, 40 quid for it, and then you're still sat on Teams to people that are elsewhere. It's a bit pointless, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think, I think that's what really kind of gets to people when companies make these decisions that are they're not thought through. They're almost just flexing muscles. It's just like, well, we want you to be in a day a week. Well, okay, that's fine, but what's the justification? What's the value? Let's do a value proposition here. If everyone's in and we've got some collaboration to do, we've got an important meeting to have, and it's really useful to have it face to face, great. Let's do that. Let's organise that. But as you said, don't just tell me I've got to come to the office for a day. Like
Just because you signed
just
an
because.
8-year lease on this office and it's empty the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. When you could be at home, you get out for a nice walk, a bit of fresh air in the day, have some nice food, get off to the gym straight after work without a commute, all that stuff. And ultimately, again, maybe the companies are not thinking about it quite so much, but all of that stuff is leading to a developer who's basically got their well-being is just much better. That when they are turning up to work, they're going to be more focused, they're going to be more motivated. You're going to get so much more out of them.
For sure. Circling back to the software developer sort of stereotype as a whole, I guess why is it so unhelpful to people both kind of in the industry and also people joining the industry in particular?
I think it comes back to the mindset side of things, and how we form beliefs, and we form beliefs, and beliefs are not necessarily fact or truth, right? What they are is true to us. So again, if we're looking at someone who conforms to a stereotype and they do certain things, we might then believe we have to be like that to be as good as that. And that's then going to shape our behaviour and even how we feel. So if you think about the perfectionist mindset, you see someone who seems to be smashing it out of the park. Like, they're answering all the questions. They seem to have an answer for everything. They've got lots of experience. They're just bam, bam, bam. But they're also really quiet. They're also quite moody. Don't really like to be disturbed. And again, you start to think, well, he knows everything. I need to know everything. like what happens if someone asks me something and I don't know the answer, or I'd speak up in a meeting and give an answer and it's wrong. It's like, and then you're kind of comparing yourself to this, I suppose, someone you've put on a pedestal, really. And what that then does is turns internal, and you start to encounter things like imposter syndrome and things like that. So you're comparing, you're creating more of really not a very good self view of yourself and your abilities. Your confidence is going to take a hit. You're then less likely to share those answers. You're less likely to kind of put yourself out there where there's a possibility that you might fail or you might get it wrong. And I think we kind of touched on it before, but juniors coming in, they could be looking up and following a path that may not be optimal. Like, that's not to say that people already following that stereotype are wrong, or that's not how you do it. There's loads of developers who've had fantastic careers being exactly that. But it's not the only way. It's absolutely not the only way. And there are so many people, particularly from like different backgrounds, who might rule themselves out of a role in development, and they're completely not taking into account their other skills, such as like how well they communicate, how friendly they are, how empathetic they are with other people, how sociable and friendly, and all of that stuff. And actually, that plays a huge role in a really kind of high performing software developer who, by the way, adds so much more to a company than lines of code. You know, the discussion and the problem solving and all of that stuff is just, it's so much, it's so far beyond the lines of code that we type.
Sure. So then I guess obviously this is aimed particularly at entry level and junior developers. So you mentioned people coming into the industry that maybe think it's not for them. Like that's amazing to know that there is this new wave of people that, like you said, like are a lot more communicative and go to the gym and have all this stuff. And I think it is becoming much more normal, which I think is great. What about someone who's sort of similar to how you described yourself, like sort of 20 odd years ago? Like, what if someone feels like they do fit this stereotype, but they don't want to? Like, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean that that's a really interesting one, and it's obviously something I can definitely relate to because I I honestly feel like I've had a personality transplant from who I was then to who I am now and where I'm going. Like, you know, my entire identity is completely different. And I'm talking about someone who was so quiet that I'd be sitting in a meeting. If someone asked me a question, poof, bright red, and and then if someone said, "Oh, look, he's gone red," poof, even redder. Like I just want to curl up and opt out. And um, on top of that, if I was walking around a supermarket and I bumped into someone who I know at work, and this could be someone I know quite well and I talk to, but just because it was a slightly different setting, I could see them and immediately I'd go red, but I'd also just get a real kind of wave of anxiety. And it's just like, to think about it, it just baffles me, even though these are people who I actually know. um so don't get me started on talking to strangers. Like, that was just horrendous. And I think, again, you know, just thinking about this stereotype, realizing that it's not the only way. So you don't have to go into that box if you want to. There is a way out. You know, there's lots of. I mean, start with reading. Just read a little bit on self development. Read a bit about the ego, and you know, a little bit about how the brain's working and how you're thinking. You can get away with just a few books that'll start to just open things up. But I mean, one thing I did when I first started was I literally set myself a goal each day, and it started off just saying hi to a stranger and just making sure I did it. And then I did it to three strangers, and then I did it to five, and and then I started to feel a little bit more comfortable, and then I just upped it a bit. And the next thing was to ask one of these people who I said hi to, ask them a question, and then I was asking three people a question. And it's so interesting because, again, when we go back to beliefs, when I was younger, I'd be a bit like, if a stranger tried to talk to me, I'd be a bit like, "You don't know who I am. Why are you talking to me? Like, leave me alone. I don't want you to talk to me." And the interesting thing about that is we have a habit of kind of projecting our own thoughts and beliefs onto other people. And so what that then meant for me was I then projected onto everyone else that they didn't want me to speak to them. So I'd look around and I'd be like, they're just gonna be like, what are you talking to me for? You don't even know me. And then I'm like, that's gonna be really awkward. But in actual fact, people are not like that in the slightest. And you say hi to someone and they're like, oh, hi. And you ask them a question and, they're kind of, they're almost pleased that you took an interest and asked them something. And it took me a while to work that out. But I did it just with those little things. And that's where it built up. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And it takes time and it takes effort. Like, you need to decide that that's what you want to do. You need to kind of think about your own identity, which is a bit deep. But I guess that's what we're talking about. Even the stereotype in itself is someone identifying as what they see as a developer. And I guess what's interesting about that is we all choose, whether we realize it or not, we choose the identity that we take on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that really resonates with me as someone that has quite bad anxiety and going red in the face. Like, don't even get me started about it. Like, it's got better, but before, like, someone could literally be like, Chris, and they could be asking me if I wanted a cup of tea. They could be asking me if I wanted anything, and just bright red straight away. And then, like you said, when as soon as you realise, it just gets worse. But it's interesting because I'm currently listening to Atomic Habits, and all of that is about changing your habits to be associated with the type of person that would do things.
Yep.
And a lot of that is, like you said, like, I am the type of person that would say hello to the person as I'm paying the petrol at the petrol station, like, and like those kind of changes, because my partner is honestly one of the most sociable people on the planet and would talk to absolutely anyone. And like, I've had times before where I've gone out for dinner with her and she sat on another table making friends with people, and I just sat there on my own, like, why is she talking to strangers? Like, I thought we were out together. But she made me realize that, like, if I don't know people, I didn't really make any effort to get to know them. I was just kind of like, they're in their world, I'm in my world, so therefore, like, we won't acknowledge each other. Which, when you see it from someone else's perspective, and like you said, like, she would say hello to absolutely anyone. Like, you realize that people don't think the same as you, so you can come across even like rude by not saying hello to them. Whereas I think I'm respecting their boundaries and not saying hello to them. You can come across actually quite cold, and that you don't like people, whereas you're trying to do a nice thing and leave them alone. So no, I really do resonate with that. And like you said, it is literally, it's just like learning anything. It's just repeated behavior, right? If you say hello to someone and they don't scream and run off, like, the next time you say hello to someone, you know that they're probably not going to scream and run off, and just kind of build up slowly.
Yeah. I mean, you're pretty unlucky if they do. But I mean, Atomic Habits is a brilliant book by James Clear. I've read it a number of times, and as you say, linking your identity to, how would someone behave who is like this, and then you basically, every time you do an action that backs that up, it's a vote for the person that you want to be. And it's a really interesting way of kind of framing it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I guess you've also got to think about, like, if you are going to go down the route of saying hello to strangers, like, make sure you pick the right time and place. If it's 2 in the morning and like in a dark alley, like, you probably will get a scream and run away. So just think about that. But I guess any kind of like final points for people that are entering this industry of software development, as to how they can become, like you said, not only a great coder, but just like a great all round person and sort of employee for any company to have.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of hit the nail on the head, and I guess what I describe that as is prioritizing your own well-being. And I do think that there's a little bit of a stigma around selfishness, and I just think, again, it's a complete misnomer. Like, it's not selfish to look after yourself and to make sure that you're in a position where you can do, one, your best work, but then two, potentially help other people. You can't really help other people if you're a crumbling mess. Like, one, you're not setting a great example. Two, you just don't have the capacity to do it. Three, if you think about yourself as an employee, you're probably not able to focus or concentrate, and you're probably not producing your best work. So just taking that as a bigger thing, look after your well-being, mental and physical. It doesn't have to be a gym, just activity. Even if it's a regular habit of walking, like walking is so beneficial. And it's another one of those things where I think so many people, when they think of exercise, they set the bar so high that they then don't really bother, because they think, well, if I'm not there, it's not worth it. Well, actually, a daily habit of walking 15, 20 minutes, half an hour is fantastically beneficial for your mental health, for your clarity, creativity, productivity, and just getting off your chair, because these are a nightmare. So there's that. And then, doing a bit of reflection, a bit of self-awareness, and then obviously some of the things that I do around actually inspecting some of your thinking and build awareness about how you're thinking in certain situations and how that's then making you feel. And if those feelings are not great for you or they're not helpful, consider a different approach, which is the ultimate thing of mindset coaching. It's like, yes, you're thinking this way and it's making you feel like this, and then you do this and the outcome you get is garbage. Well, okay, but how does someone else think who's getting a really great outcome in that exact situation? It's a little bit like the identity thing and the atomic habits. Well, you might think of it as being this terrible situation. Someone else is thinking of it as being a really great learning opportunity. And the situation is the same situation. Like, nothing's changed there. The only thing that changes is how two people are thinking about it. And the outcomes are potentially completely different.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much, Richard. Really enjoyed that. And I guess if people want to follow up with you or kind of reach out to you for kind of further details on what you do, is LinkedIn the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. Connect or follow on there, and rdcoach.com as well.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, like I said, really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for coming on. Any questions for Richard, please reach out to him directly. Any questions for us, suggestions of pod topics, any feedback, it's podcast at thedeveloperlink.io. Thanks again, Richard, and I'll see you guys next time.